Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very special story for you. It's about a bear, big, strong, and completely alone. But this bear had the kindest heart in the whole forest. This is the story of Bruno and the friendship that changed everything. The lonely bear. Deep in the heart of Maplewood Forest, where the trees grew so tall they tickled the clouds, lived a big brown bear named Bruno. Bruno had thick, dark fur, heavy paws, and a low, rumbling voice that shook the leaves when he yawned, and because of that, every single animal in the forest was terrified of him. When Bruno walked down the trail, the rabbits scattered. When he approached the riverbank, the deer trotted away. Even the squirrels, who were brave enough to steal nuts from sleeping foxes, would zip up into the highest branches the moment Bruno appeared. Every evening, Bruno would sit alone by the river. He'd stare at his reflection in the still water and wonder, is this really how it's always going to be? He never growled at anyone, never chased anyone, never even stepped on an ant on purpose. But no one gave him a chance to show them that. The night of the storm. One autumn evening, the sky turned a deep, angry purple. Thunder rolled across the mountains. Lightning cracked open the clouds, and rain came pouring down like the sky had been holding it in for months. Bruno curled up inside his cave, listening to the storm rage outside, and then he heard it. A tiny sound, barely there, almost swallowed by the thunder, crying. Bruno pushed himself up and stepped out into the rain. There, huddled beneath the roots of a fallen oak tree, was a small fox kit. She was soaking wet, trembling, and completely lost. She couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Bruno stepped closer. The fox kit squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the worst. But the worst didn't come. Instead, Bruno gently, so gently, scooped her up with both paws. He tucked her against his warm chest, shielded her from the rain with his broad back, and carried her into his cave. He didn't sleep that night. He stayed awake, making sure she stayed warm until the storm finally passed. Word spreads through the forest. When morning came, golden and quiet, a red fox appeared at the edge of Bruno's cave, eyes wide with worry. It was the kit's mother, Rosie. She'd been searching all night. She froze when she saw Bruno, but before she could run, her daughter scrambled to her feet and ran toward her, yipping happily. Then she looked back at Bruno with bright little eyes and said, "Mama, he saved me. I was lost and cold and he kept me safe all night." Rosie stared at Bruno. Bruno looked at the ground, unsure what to say. Then Rosie bowed her head. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for protecting my child." Bruno didn't know what to do with those words. No one had ever thanked him before. The story spread quickly. By afternoon, every animal in Maplewood Forest had heard it. The big scary bear had stayed up all night in a storm to keep a tiny fox kit warm. The rabbit whispered to the deer, "Maybe we've been wrong about him." The deer whispered to the squirrels, "Maybe we should find out." New friends. The next afternoon, Bruno was sitting by the river. Same spot, same lonely silence. Then he heard small footsteps on the pebbles. He turned. It was a young rabbit named Pip, ears flat, nose twitching nervously, walking slowly toward him. "Can I sit with you?" Pip asked. Bruno blinked. "Sure," he said softly. A few minutes later, a deer named Clara appeared, then two squirrels who introduced themselves as Max and Milo, then Rosie the fox and her kit, whose name turned out to be Ember. One by one, they sat down along the riverbank beside Bruno. At first, nobody said much. They just sat there, watching the water shimmer in the afternoon light. Then Pip said, "I like this spot." And Clara said, "Me too." And Ember climbed right up onto Bruno's paw and fell asleep. Bruno sat very, very still, afraid that if he moved, this moment would disappear. Later, as the sun began to set and everyone got up to head home, Pip looked up at Bruno and said, "Same time tomorrow?" And Bruno smiled, probably for the first time in years. Same time tomorrow. The day Bruno saved the forest.